Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to Pits To Podium. At last, it's the 70th anniversary Grand Prix. 70 years since Formula One actually began. And what a way to honor the sport by having this race at the place where it all started, Silverstone. We saw some dramatic racing the last time out. And to discuss what could happen in this week's 70th anniversary Grand Prix, I've got our in-house Formula One virtuoso, Kunal Shah, with us. Kunal, firstly, what a weekend it's been so far. And what a great amount of content that we're coming up with Pits to Podium as well.
Absolutely. I've been getting some really good reviews about our working in F1 series and especially your interview with Alex Lynn Soumil. So keep it up. And guys, you're welcome to come and check out the playlist wherever you're listening to us or hearing to us or seeing us, because we're pretty much there in every format.
Absolutely. There's a lot coming up on Pits to Podium after this as well. But let's get down to Formula One. This is where all the drama will be. And after what happened last week, all the tires bursting out on the final lap, all the blisters, there is some news coming up that the reason for that may be a curb on the exit of Beckett's that was changed. But Kunal, the interesting part is the tires for this weekend are apparently softer.
I'm
If
actually
that was a solution.
Yeah, I mean, I'm actually looking forward to, the tires being softer this weekend. I think that's fairly aggressive stance from Pirelli. They're not making a change to their offering, despite, their hardest tire taking a beating last weekend. And also it'll open up a lot of strategy options. You mentioned the curb being extended. I'm sure Pirelli will also have, they'll raise their minimum tire pressure limits as well to sort of help with the durability of the tires. So in all, we're going to have an exciting weekend again, because not just the strategy, people will still be watching the race to see if in case tire failures sort of affect the race result one more weekend.
Absolutely. And the psychological element of this is going to be very interesting as well, because after all that's happened last week, teams will be much more conservative. You could end up seeing a race like 2012 all over again with multiple pit stops and drivers going to make 2 or even 3 stops in certain cases to maximize their pace.
I would bet on Red Bull Racing, trying a 3-stopper just to sort of get to at least one of the Mercedes-Benz cars. And, the truth about the whole Red Bull issue is that with Max Verstappen up ahead, fighting with the Mercedes cars and Albon sort of not being there yet, they sort of lack a strategic, if I could use the term of chess, they lack sort of the strategic benefit that they could have by having 2 cars racing up front with the Mercedes car. So it'll be interesting to see what Red Bull is able to do with softer tire compounds.
Absolutely. And it's not even like a game of warfare where you can actually bluff and hide your way through. It's Formula One. Everything is open and clear to see. And Alex Albon's pace deficit is open for the entire world to see. As sad as it may be, hopefully we can see the young British Thai driver come back on track. But what do we speak about first, Kunal? Do we go for the pink Mercedes or do we go for the actual black and silver ones first?
We should do the pink Mercedes and how,
Sure.
the results of the protest could come, say, within 24 hours of this video, because that's the one result everyone's been waiting for. Renault particularly, and not just Renault, but even Ferrari have now joined the list of teams that actually wants to know, hey, what do we do with this design philosophy?
It's a bit strange, isn't it? When you consider Ferrari, do you expect them to be the whole gods of Formula One, designing the ultimate cars, painted in blood red with your heroes driving on them? Now they're just protesting against a measly team of Racing Point who are spending half the budget as they are. It's a big fall from grace, I know. But about Racing Point, it's good that you mentioned about the protest, Kunal, because this has been going on for as long as I can remember. In case we haven't caught up with this, where were you living? Under a rock? So Renault have been consistently protesting against Racing Point. These two have a long history of doing that to each other. Just take a look back at Suzuka 2019. And Renault have done 3, or at least maybe even 4 protests so far, trying to question the legality of firstly the entire car's philosophy, then the brakes, then the design philosophy again. It's all queuing up one after the other. And yet again, Renault have been back with the protest, but this time Mercedes were also involved in the hearing. Went for about 2.5 hours. Mercedes went back at 1 hour itself, but there must have been something very serious going on that will come out, of course, to us in the next, couple of days, so to say. But Kunal, one big question that I have in mind: what if they lose? Because so far we're all getting the feeling that okay, Racing Point are on the right side. They've got their car checked by the FIA. They've exploited that one tiny loophole available in the rules. But there is a possibility that they can get the decision overturned against them as well.
So it's a very interesting question because, what if they lose? Do they have to design the whole car by themselves again? Do they have to design just the one brake duct? Can they still race with the tracing point brake duct, if we may call it that way? And Ottmar Schaffnauer, my former boss at Force India, he actually explained it very well. He said, this is our design. And of course, now they've even revealed that they actually bought the 2019 brake ducts from Mercedes, before they were listed as parts that you had to sort of make by yourself. Okay, so it's a sort of a gray area, this piece. But he turned around and said that if we have to design the brake duct by ourselves, we would. Okay, but who's to say that the design won't look the same as it currently does, because that's the philosophy that we followed, and that's what we believe is the best approach for our car. And then he of course went on to say that it could even be a better design if we find some more gains in the wind tunnel. So, it's a cat and mouse game. It'll be interesting to see, why and what the FIA think of this. And, one of the primary reasons, why Renault is protesting F1 team alliances. And, we've actually written about this on our website, pitstopodium.com, is that, from 2021, Renault is going to be the only standalone team in the paddock, or the only standalone manufacturer. Honda has customer teams. Ferrari and Mercedes, as we know, have customer teams as well. And Renault realized that maybe with the whole sliding scale aero regulations that are going to come into play, who's to say that Mercedes will not use Racing Point's available wind tunnel time, CFD time, to develop their own W12 car, next season. So the point is, Renault suddenly feel that, by not having a customer, they could just be even more disadvantaged. Firstly, not having, a competitive benchmark, and second, not even having, somebody else's wind tunnel and CFD time and so on, right? So that's one of the reasons why Renault is trying to get some bit of clarity on these whole F1 team alliances that we are seeing in the sport.
Gamesmanship. I absolutely love it. I would love to see how this plays out towards the end. But on the micro level, Kunal, it's all about the races. It's all about the results that you can garner on the track. Renault were good. Renault were very good last week. They got fourth and sixth with Ricciardo and Ocon, respectively. Are they going to be legitimate challengers to Racing Point? And are McLaren going to be in the mix? Because from what we saw last week, there was, I think, a faulty bolt that caused Hulkenberg's engine to fail in the first place. Lance Stroll was off the pace as well. What can they do from now? Because Sergio Perez, from the looks of things, is going to be benched, not benched exactly, but quarantined for this one too. So they've got Hulkenberg and Stroll. McLaren, by far and away, seem to have the better driver pairing. But is the car better? Who's going to come out on top in this whole midfield holy trinity that we are getting to see? And plus Ferrari as well in this now.
The midfield is so exciting. And what I suspect is going to happen is we will see the form factor in the midfield change for the second race in Silverstone. Teams would have, had more data and they would have learned more. And something very interesting, which, Mark Hughes has reported, is that Silverstone has actually gone away from being a high-speed downforce circuit, right? And he pointed this out by explaining the difference in setups between a Charles Leclerc's Ferrari and Sebastian Vettel's Ferrari. And as we all know, Charles actually ran a very low downforce setup, for the first race in Silverstone. And, Sebastian chose to go with the very high downforce setup, and we saw the difference in their performances. And the same thing was actually also found with the Racing Point cars, that they ran extremely high wing than most of their competitors, right? So it could be that the car, characteristics require such a setup. But, I'm interested to see if teams actually, reduce their wings and sort of lower their downforce and see where, how different can their cars go in the second race at Silverstone. So I'm pretty excited how, the whole midfield battle is going to just evolve, over a matter of 5 days.
Absolutely. They're going at such a high speed right now that even the corners sometimes feel like straight. So that sort of downforce can be a bit of a laggy factor for them. the good thing is, Kunal, it's a bit like a test match. If you don't get it right in the first chance, you have another race at the very same circuit just a week later on. So maybe you can tinker around, find those things that you have to work on and get that thing better. So that's a big advantage for the likes of Racing Point and Ferrari. But now let's get to Mercedes. Now let's get back to the very top, because those guys, we've said it time and again, winning on three wheels, just ask them how to do that. But what's in store for them this week? Because we saw the blowouts. Now, apparently, the psychology would say, okay, maybe you can go a bit more conservative. Is that going to allow the likes of Red Bull to just go all out, try to see what happens? Just go for it. I mean, nothing venture, nothing gain. If it pays off, you could get a win. If it doesn't, well, we're in the same place as we are already. Do you think something like that will come into picture this weekend?
I frankly don't think so. I'm sure Mercedes are already thinking of, can we win all the races and create another record? Can we wrap up the titles as early as we can? And let's also remember, they can't afford to be complacent because despite having such a dominant car this season, they've had just one to finish in four races. Okay. And then the second thing is, however complacent they may or may not be, their drivers are absolutely locked in a battle for the drivers' championship as well. So, there's still a lot to play for. And I'm pretty sure Mercedes are just also, on a funny note, wondering how much more can we embarrass our rivals, in 2020. So I'm excited to see what the gap between Mercedes and the rest of the teams would be. And, I was of course, again, on a funny note, waiting to see if Ferrari get lapped in the first race at Silverstone. And, that, of course, didn't happen because of safety car periods and the likes. But could that even be a possibility for the second race? Who knows?
That'll be symbolic. That'll be just symbolic of everything that has happened since 2014. Mercedes on the rise, embarrassing everyone else, just going on a spree of killing people. And what I really love about Mercedes is, as you mentioned, complacency. It's been, 6, 7 odd seasons that Mercedes has been at the very top. They haven't slacked off. Every year they just come up with something even better. Now, if the word is to be believed, apparently their qualifying lap time was 7/10 of a second faster. I know weather can come into picture, setups can come into picture. But even let's say if that contributes to around 3 or 4 tenths of a second, making a car like last year's Mercedes even 3 or 4 tenths faster, that's an incredible ask. I want to know what happens in the management structure back at Mercedes. Must be a very fascinating thing to see. But this actually brings us on very well onto Ferrari, because you mentioned about them getting lapped. That'll be the ultimate sort of disrespect for all their fans, because it just shows everything that has been going wrong with the team. You mentioned about the setups. You mentioned about the difference between Leclerc and Vettel. What do you think they can extract? Because although from the looks of things, they are the 5th or 6th fastest team, we ought to speak about them, because Ferrari, of course.
I'm just going to add, imagine Ferrari getting lapped at Formula One's 70th anniversary Grand Prix.
Goodness.
And then, of course, their 1000th race start at Mugello, is, of course, a few weekends away. But, I'm sure Ferrari will try and see how they can extract more with their low downforce setup, because it helped Charles sort of qualify, up ahead. He had the fastest, he was the fastest in the speed trap down the main straight. So he wasn't, particularly overtaken by, a lot of other drivers as well. So, they will probably go with the same approach with Charles. But the interesting thing to see would be is Sebastian able to adapt and use a similar setup and see what he's able to extract from the package.
Exactly. It's been a torrid season for Sebastian Vettel so far. The rumors from the first week was that he sat in Otmar Safnauer's Ferrari. You see the link, don't you? It could be very possible that Vettel goes to Racing Point. Who leads the team? That's a matter for another day. Looks like Sergio Perez so far. But this actually brings us very well onto the fact of reserve drivers, because speaking of Racing Point, they've got Nico Hülkenberg drafted in. Last chance for him, in a way, to kind of prove that he can get a seat, perhaps at, say, Alfa Romeo, if neither of the drivers are performing, or even Haas, because Grosjean doesn't really seem to be in the mood of staying in F1 for longer, considering how he's been speaking in his last couple of interviews. So what do you think is in store for Hülkenberg, and how do you think he can perform? Because last week, Q2 exit for him.
Yeah, I mean, Q2 exit is fine. I mean, qualifying is always tougher to come back to nail that one lap that you need. He wasn't as far away from Lance Stroll, but again, I don't know how many people would consider Lance Stroll as a very serious benchmark, in the paddock. But could Nico Hulkenberg end up being the one driver who drives for multiple teams in 2020? That's another question that, could be answered this season as well. We know Paul de Resta is going to be the reserve driver for McLaren, but with Nico being the most recent reserve driver to have driven in a race, could he end up racing elsewhere as well? Of course, we're not wishing that any driver ends up missing a race because of COVID-19 reasons. But it's interesting how teams are finally taking the whole reserve driver issue far more seriously. We've seen Toto Wolff talk about it and how Esteban Gutierrez doesn't make the cut because of super license reasons, and Van Doorn isn't there, and so on. And now Wolff is out looking for reserve driver for Mercedes and so on. So finally, it's something that teams are taking seriously. We took it really seriously 3 months ago when we spoke about how it's going to be so important to be a reserve driver, and so different to be a reserve driver in 2020.
Absolutely. Lots of things happening regarding them. And this just makes me feel that, okay, this could be a good chance for younger drivers, say someone like Formula 2. Maybe there could be something in the regulations fixed that it could allow younger drivers to have greater chances as a reserve driver. And that's a topic for later on. That's something we can speak about later. But Kunal, just before we wrap this up, what are your final predictions for the 70th anniversary GP? I'm not talking about the top. We know who's going to be right there. But from P2 and lower on, how do you think that's going to play out towards the end?
I think I will bank a little more on Red Bull's strategy. Okay. I have a feeling they'll be closer to P2, if not at P2. Of course, it will need yet another, issue with the Mercedes cars or their tires or something for them to literally get it very convincingly. But I think it'll be Red Bull followed by McLaren, maybe. Then you could put Charles out there, and then a Renault, I would say. So that's pretty much my prediction. But I'm just going to talk about one last thing before I ask you your prediction, Soumil.
Absolutely.
Everyone went gaga over Sebastian getting into Otmar's Ferrari after the first race and zipping off. I would have been more gaga if Sebastian got into Otmar's Aston Martin and went away, because that's what we are actually waiting to see.
That's a good point. That's a good point. But who knows? Maybe it's just a sign of Otmar saying, perhaps Ferrari are better on the road car division. And that's something we must not debate right now. That'll be just a proper road car bonkers match that's gonna happen. Ferrari versus Aston Martin. Big debate on the Grand Touring scale. But yeah. Vettel in Otmar's Ferrari. Who knows? Maybe next year it could be Vettel in Otmar's Aston Martin. Or who knows? Maybe his own Aston Martin next year. That's something we should have a look at later on.
But your predictions before we wrap up this episode.
That's the one thing that I usually refrain from, because it's going to be so unpredictable from the midfield. But I just like you, I have my hopes banked up on McLaren. I see them trying to get the maximum out of their races. That is something that they've done better than the others. Case in point, Racing Point. They've got the pace, but they're not really able to extract that much in terms of the points. So I'm going to be banking on McLaren. Let's see how Nico Hulkenberg does. No predictions for him, but Renault are going to be close up. In the lower midfield, considering how good Pierre Gasly has been, expect him just to nudge on the door of the top 10 finishers. That should be interesting. And as always, watch out for the tires, because who knows, with softer compounds, we might just be seeing even more blowouts, or if not that, teams being way too conservative and going for 2 or 3 stops.
Absolutely. But before we wrap up, this born in 1950 is definitely not my birth year, in case you or anyone viewing, was assuming.
Exactly. It's interesting to think Formula One, it's such an old sport. It's been around for more than we can even imagine. Fantastic to see it celebrating its 70th anniversary at the place where it all began, isn't it?
Absolutely. I'm eager to see what new content Formula One will throw up as well, because they have a fantastic content bank, and I'm pretty sure we'll be we'll get to see it all on their social media handles, and maybe even in the World Feed broadcast.
Exactly. That's going to be so much fun to watch out for. But folks, if you enjoyed watching this video, please feel free to leave a like. And if you haven't subscribed already, why? What's the reason? Tell us why. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel as well. Share this video with your fellow Formula One fans. And maybe we can all form a good Formula One community where we can speak about the sport, have a few good discussions, and see where that takes us. In the end, folks, thank you so much for watching. Kunal, as always, a pleasure to speak to you about Formula One, speak with you about Formula One as well.
Likewise,
And
Soumil, thanks very much. And we'll see you guys at a video, in the next few days.
absolutely. See you. Bye-bye.